Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Free TV. It is Friday, July 25th, 2025, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. Thank God I'm free and that we're all still hanging on by our fingernails here to freedom as all this incredible news is going on. So I'm going to jump right in here with my disclaimer. We're going to jump into the news. This video is for entertainment purposes only. It is protected by the United States Constitution, protecting free speech, as well as the Sullivan Act and reporting. It is not intended to bully or harass anyone, never to incite violence, hatred, or lawlessness of any kind. It doesn't give legal, medical, or financial advice, and there are further disclaimers in the description below. So welcome back to the channel. I thank you so much for being back with me here on a Friday evening. And I want to say thank you, of course, to everybody supporting the channel. I always start out by doing so. Your donations, your positive comments, your news tips, all of it. And I want a special shout out to Tom and Ginny. Thanks so much for being such great supporters for so long. So appreciate you. And also a shout out to Nella. Thank you so much. And I'll get back to you on how that goes. And so we have so much news to jump into. I will have to plug at the end of the channel, at the end of the video here, for my wonderful sponsor, c60evo.com/YAFTV. Use the code YAFTV for 10% off. Getting close to the end of the month, I always give away 2 bottles each month to people who donate to the channel. But I will plug further about the wonderful ESS16 molecule that cleans out your mitochondria and your neurons and keeps you sharp and really fights all that inflammation. But here we go. We're going to get into the news. I'm going to put on the glasses. So we have so much happening that it's just out of this world. Trump, of course, has gone to Scotland for 5 days. Okay, and hopefully he'll get a little vacation time in here because I think he really needs it and deserves it. But basically, he's meeting with Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, tonight, happening probably as we speak or already over. And it's really not known what they're going to be talking about. Of course, everything Ukraine, Russia, and of course the trade deal. Trump emphasized that when he was leaving to go to Scotland, that they would be talking more about the trade deal with the EU. However, there's so much else going on and partially to do with Ukraine that I'm going to get into here. And Zaluzhnyi, General Zaluzhnyi, who was exiled from Ukraine, who was going to overthrow Zelensky back before a couple of years ago when Victoria Nuland stepped in. This was around the Boris Johnson time, and basically, made this huge, trip there to stop Zaluzhnyi and the military taking down Zelensky and claiming control of the country in this war through all of the fraud and the laundering and everything going on. And Zaluzhnyi's now in the UK, exiled, and of course has been high up, in there with all of the MI6, everybody, the CIA, NATO. And so it's interesting to wonder, is President Trump with Starmer, are they talking about this situation of replacing Zelensky? Because, of course, we've seen in the last week in Ukraine, they're having these mass protests in Kiev. And you never know if they're real or if they're, Memorex, like back in the 90s. You don't know if they are, real or if they're another one of these CIA created, attempts to protest. But it seems kind of real because it's to do with Zelensky. The parliament under Zelensky has repealed a couple of anti-corruption laws, right? Remember that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in the world. I think that, Israel's kind of fighting for that title now, but basically these anti-corruption laws that kind of shields the government from being, over any oversight over what they're doing during this whole complete authoritarian government they're living under with no elections under Zelensky. People are out protesting. It's a whole thing. Haven't seen huge amounts of ready-made signs, or some kind of NGO coming in with their perfectly created media stuff here in these protests. So there could be this play on getting Zelensky out, and this having to do with in Trump's eyes, ending the war, but with Zaluzhnyi there in the UK and him meeting with Starmer tonight and everything being discussed and the weapons going through NATO to Ukraine. And of course, we're about 2 weeks plus, going on 3 weeks in to this 50-day, this 50-day threat of Trump to Russia that, we have a ceasefire in 50 days or else we're going to do these secondary tariffs on you, secondary sanctions on you, where basically we're going to charge any country that is buying your gas and oil, which is multiple, think Japan, think all these countries that rely on Russian oil and gas, being charged 100% extra tariff. And I don't think Trump wants to do that at all. I think he was buying these 50 days. And so it will be really interesting to see, because they're also trying to gin up this war in southern Russia. Okay, so we've got the Ukraine front, but in southern Russia with the stands, right? When you've got Uzbekistan and all of the different stands, and especially Azerbaijan, and what's been going on with Israel, with their, basically aiding the Azerbis there, with the strikes on Armenia and everything going on there with the Christians, the drones, everything out of Mossad and Israel. They're trying to gin up more war on the Russian, the southern Russian area there that is right there with Iran. And I'll get into that more here in this video. But I also have to wonder if Trump will be meeting with Nigel Farage. So I believe he's in Aberdeen right now in Scotland. And of course, his mother is Scottish descent. And he has 2 different golf courses and clubs there in Scotland, in Aberdeen, and then also on the West Coast there. And so, I have to wonder, is he going to see Nigel Farage, who the Progress Party has been really just doing incredible leaps and bounds in Keir Starmer's government. The Labour Party is just tanking, and everybody hates them. And the calls for mass deportations, all of this happening, as well as in Spain, huge, and Ireland. So there's so much going on, and we'll see what happens, and hopefully he'll get some downtime as well there in Scotland. But we just pray for the protection of President Trump while he is overseas. But I wanted to come to a couple things here before we kind of dig deeper into the meat. I've been following this Pope Leo the 14th and his whole new first American Pope. They're riding high on that, trying to milk it for all it's worth to try to get money out of Americans to feed the Vatican again. That's basically bankrupt. They have tons of money, but it's all laundered. And we have this really disgusting news coming out of the Vatican, which has to do with an elite priest, Father Carlo Carpella, who in 2017, he was placed in the U.S. Embassy in D.C. and placed there by higher ups, like high people. This is he was ordained by Cardinal Martini. Okay, huge to do with everything to do with the San Gallen Mafia. What ran the Black Church, the Black Pope, the whole P2 Lodge, everything connected with Malta, the Knights of Malta, everything about the Jesuit Mafia. And this guy, Carlo Carpella, who is 100% total pedophile, he was in DC under McCarrick, okay, and this has to do with Trump's first term, where they got aware of this case of him being caught with all this child pornography, okay, and not just caught with it, but distributing child pornography through his internet connections. And he kind of fled and went to Canada for a so-called vacation. And the Trump administration, the DOJ had put out a arrest warrant for him and went through Canada, who also agreed. And they had tried to arrest him as he was going into Windsor, Ontario, and they would not. The Vatican would not give. They would not lift the diplomatic immunity of this Father Carlo Carpella. And he basically, um, was brought to Rome. He fled to Rome because he could on his diplomatic immunity. He fled to Rome, and then he was supposedly prosecuted in the Vatican, being held there in their Vatican jail. I'm sure it's like Ghislaine Maxwell's, fancy jail there in Tallahassee, outside of Tallahassee, Florida, which we're going to get into everything going on there. But basically, he was not defrocked. He was not, laicized. He was kept in there. And now we have good old Pope Leo, bringing him back into the what is basically the Secretary of State in the Vatican. He is returning to his Secretariat of State position, writing speeches for the Vatican, just, super involved in the deep ends. And basically, when we look at Epstein and whatever, it's this inner pedophile ring within the Vatican and everything to do with that. And so he's been brought back in by Leo. And you have to wonder about bribery there, about, all of it, that within this is not that they care, it's just protecting their own pedophile network out of the Black Church. And so very intense there that we're seeing Father Carlo Carpella go back into a big position in what is the Secretary of State at the Vatican, a known child pornographer, pedophile who is distributing child pornography. I mean, what in the world, like you just can't make it up. So, okay, moving on from there, I want to just point out to everybody a really great little documentary you might want to watch. It's only like 24 minutes long. Go to Steve Cortez made it. It's cortezinvestigates.com. And this is this short documentary about Barack Obama. It's called The Real Barack Obama. And one thing it highlights that is so interesting is his library there on the south side of Chicago, outside Jackson Park. And it is an abomination. It is this brutalist architecture of just the ugliest, just edifice of cement. And it had like a $300 million budget. And of course, we'll get into the Fed and what's gone on there with their $3 billion budget. $300 million budget, that's now $1 billion. They've spent $1 billion. All this laundering of money. You look at it and it's like, there's no way this could cost, you wouldn't pay, 10 cents for it. It's the ugliest, windowless, concrete, brutalist, awful, awful looking thing. And it's just very interesting to see, back in the day, this was a few years ago, there was all these reporters coming out talking about that there was a mini Hadron Collider, okay, underneath the Obama library, that this thing was basically a cover, that all the money was actually going underground for this mini Hadron Collider. Okay, and we're going to get into CERN and Epstein and how it's all interconnected here. And that they were having all these health disturbances, all kinds of weird stuff going on for the people in the area. And I'll see what I can link below about that. But basically, that this ugly edifice is just a cover for something nefarious underground, kind of like at the Fed, where Trump came out and revealed very clearly that, hey, they're building underground private parking garages. They're building tons of basements and tunnels under the Fed. And he was really good at exposing that, as well as, putting Powell on the hot seat there when he was with him at the Fed yesterday, talking about, hey, it's actually up to 3.1 or 2 billion now with Tim Scott. It's not just the 2.7 billion. And just kind of raking him over the coals as he's trying to pressure him to bring the interest rates down. But he also was very, he cited how he, redid the what was the post office building there in D.C., brought it down to the steel infrastructure, and rebuilt the whole thing for $200 to $250 million. And it's a much larger, project. And so very well done there. And we're going to get into that. Actually, I might cover that now real quick. We have some really great news concerning the Fed, which has to do with a group, a financial firm who has been doing all this modeling regarding basically how whether or not woke and DEI and all this stuff goes into these different companies that you might want to invest in. But this firm has filed a lawsuit versus the Fed. Okay, this is Azoria, and they, I think you find them at SPXM on the NASDAQ, but they're Azoria, the CEO, James Fishback, he basically did this huge lawsuit against the Fed for holding private meetings, which aren't allowed since the Sunshine Act that was brought out after everything that went down with Nixon. Okay, like ditch gold and let's just have the fiat currency. Well, after all of that, they created the Sunshine Act, and all the Fed meetings were supposed to be open to the public, visible, watchable, everything, and they never have been, and nobody's ever held them accountable. And so Fishback found this and made this huge lawsuit against the Fed for holding private meetings against the law, the Sunshine Act of 1976. And interestingly, you get Beryl Howell, another Inn of Courts member, right, controlled by the Pilgrim Society out of the bar in the city of London. Beryl Howell pops up in all of these cases. So very interestingly and strangely, she has put out a emergency hearing on Monday. So this is very bizarre because the next Fed meeting was supposed to be on Tuesday, discussing the interest rates, discussing everything. And so there's like these 17 members that get together and meet, and it's the governors and the board of governors and et cetera. And we know Powell is on the boards of both the EU Fed, the Bank of International Settlements, et cetera. And basically what Fishback is saying is that the Fed is barely recognizable as any kind of pro-economy agency for America. They're doing the opposite, that the Fed Reserve is ignoring their own data, that they have what's called this natural rate model that shows rates should be at least 1%, 1 point lower, okay? And that they're keeping this elevated against every economic their own economic documentation and what they know. And he's saying, that this will be clear if we were able to see the meetings, which legally we're supposed to be able to. And so they got this temporary restraining order to block a private Federal Reserve meeting, and because it's illegal. And they're actually having a hearing on Monday where the Fed meeting is supposed to be on Tuesday. So this is very interesting. Very, very, interesting and timely. So we'll see what happens there on Monday with that, and I'll come back to it. And now I want to go to this man, Fred Fleitz. Fred Fleitz is, he was under Trump. He was the National Security Council Chief of Staff under Trump, and he's come out with some really big news, and I've linked it below at americafirstpolicy.com. Fred Fleitz. Well, what he's saying is that a huge thing that's coming here to do with this crossfire hurricane situation and everything to do with the report that came out, doctored by Brennan and the CIA and everything that they're basing this now, what is the strike force coming out of the DOJ to set up these grand juries, is a hugely looked over thing. And Gabbard and what's come out here when they put out the emails to do with Hillary's health, and that she had these psychosocial emotional issues where she was raging and she was manic depressive, she had mania, and then she'd be like super raging and on massive drugs and tranquilizers. And there's always that black van that traveled with her everywhere she went. Well, what Fleitz is saying is that the Russians had all of this information, all of these emails. They had the information about Hillary's health, and they had all this backup information about her, and it was known at that time, as he was in there in early 2017, that the intelligent assessment was not only to try to set up Trump with Russia, as being that he was involved with Russia, but that Russia actually very much wanted Hillary Clinton in. That they had the info on her and her health and everything else. And because, kind of like Joe Biden and everything he did, that she would be very controlled because she would be super, hopped up on drugs, and that they could control her much more easily. And that's what Putin absolutely wanted. And this is what they're hiding in the guts, okay, of these reports to do with Russia. And so as this is like moving along, it's going to be very interesting to see if that comes out as a central issue on this. And so we're going to move on to I think the Epstein stuff here for a second and get into a bunch of other things. But I did want to mention a couple interesting things that Trump has thrown out in the last few days. One is that there could be tariff rebate checks coming to Americans, that he's thinking about this. That would be fantastic. And he's thinking about no capital gains on home sales to try to make it easier for people to be able to transfer home sales and to not suffer the massive taxes. So not only the no capital gains for farms and other big ag stuff, but no capital gains on home sales, period. So we're praying for that, and we're still praying for that 10% cap on the credit cards, right? Credit card interest. That would be fantastic. And so I'm going to jump over here to some of the Epstein stuff. So, of course, we have Todd Blanche now, 2 days of meetings with Maxwell, Trump saying, no, I haven't been considering a pardon. And basically Trump throwing out names like Larry Summers, Bill Clinton's Secretary of the Treasury, Bill Clinton, massive amounts of hedge fund heads that he's referring to in his 40 minutes that he spent on the White House lawn there before getting into Marine One this morning. And all very interesting. And Todd Blanche met with Maxwell yesterday and today. And we know she's vying for a massive deal, obviously. And we hear from Blanche that, there's at least, or her lawyer, Marcus, at least 100 names of people that came out. We already know from even Bindergate that there was at least like 300, almost 350 names in there. 100 names that were discussed, and there's boxes. You're watching different videos. You see the the DOJ vans with the boxes going in and out, and all of it. And so I wanted to kind of just revisit here because there's so much to do here that has to do with the AI and the Epstein stuff, and I think it's really important to talk about. And I did want to say a couple of the huge wins is we did have the judge in the USAID case, and I'm going to hop into the AI and Epstein stuff in a moment here. But USAID dismantling is going forward under Judge Carl Nichols. He basically said, yes, that the Trump administration can bring USAID as well as the U.S. Institute for Peace down to their statutory minimums, that people can go to the Merit Systems Board, which is what they're supposed to do in D.C. if you think you've been wrongfully fired. And contractors can go to the Court of Federal Claims, but they can't stop what Trump is doing here in dismantling USAID. So that is fantastic. Very, very good. And so when we look at Epstein and we look at things like Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from out of Oregon, just but he's basically, saying, hey, how about the $1.1 billion that were in Epstein's, just one account, okay, of multiple bank accounts where there were 4,725 wire transfers on this single account. And by the way, it all disappeared after he was dead. And you have Richard, what is it? Richard, sorry, Richard, I'm trying to remember the judge's name, who just totally shut down the case as soon as Bill Barr went to see Epstein, and then Epstein was dead. Um, um, but basically, the money disappeared from his accounts like instantly after that. It was gone. And the same thing happened with Robert Maxwell. After he died, all of his money was gone. And it all funnels back into the same machine of Mossad and the CIA and MI6 in what is, this massive pay for play and also bribery scandal. And so even Ron Wyden is saying, hey, all you have to do is follow that bank trail. You can follow all of those money transfers, and we know, okay, who's been involved, and that's exactly true. And so as we're looking at that and wondering what might go down, we have to kind of look at a number of things. Okay, Israel has always been not an ally of the USA, but an enemy using the USA. Mossad, Maxwell was always KGB as well as Mossad and MI6, and so it all plays into multiple layers here. And so when we look at when we look at um, everybody that could go down, and people like Bill Gates, for instance, and all the scientists involved here, the medical doctors, the biologists, the microbiologists, the geneticists, all of this interconnected when you look at the full spectrum of what Epstein was involved in, and Trump saying, we should really look at that former president of Harvard, um, and goes into MIT, goes into all of it. But it all gets down into the connection between the development of AI and the whole Epstein operation, and how we're now stuck in this AI agreement with Mossad, basically, the USA Israel Agreement of Understanding on AI that just went through like 10 days ago, and now, totally set up there in the Genius Act and the 3 executive orders that I talked about in my last video to do with the White House AI success plan. Well, I wanted to mention this guy who's just fantastic, and his name is Joey Pepperoni. Such a great name, Joey Pepperoni. You can find him at _Joey Pepperoni, exactly how you would think to spell it. And he came out with this incredible, he's been just putting out great reports to do with things he's been doing with AI, to do with Epstein, to do with this blackboard that was in Epstein's temple there on Pedo Island, and how he was able to break it down, that he put it in through, I think, Grok and ChatGPT and all this stuff about what was on this blackboard. And it was all these, people thought it was like mathematical computations and some advanced thing by the pedo scientists that went there or whatever, but it looked to be just really this massive display of summoning demons using technological means. And it's very interesting to look at his stuff, and I will link him below so you can do that. But he was talking a lot about plasma, and we know that CERN, okay, plasma being the 4th state of matter, and how the connection through, from our consciousness into other dimensions relates through plasma, and the new AI stuff, and especially what they're doing with AI to do with brain cells and do with creating AI using synthetic biology, like actual human matter that on which computers run. And just imagine what's going on underground, right? We know that Ghislaine had her, her specifically was trained to be a submarine pilot. You're just like, what? Yeah, talking about it for years. I know you all probably know already, but she was a submarine pilot, especially these small little subs, and in especially to do with the island and its connection with tunnels connected with deep underground bases, where the deep underground bases and the railway systems that run across the USA that are underground to do with these bases, that the submarines were picking up people that she was in charge of trafficking people out of those areas into these rituals on the island. But what this has to do with CERN, okay, is that CERN is right now, it's quadrupling its size. It's going to be 4 times larger than it has been operating at. And it had to shut down, then it started up, then it shut down, then it started up. They do all the crazy satanic rituals there. But CERN is now being built 4 times larger. And this whole breakdown by AI that Joey Pepperoni did on the Epstein or whoever's blackboard on the temple at the temple there on Epstein Island had everything to do with everything we already have been studying for years and not talked about so much lately, which is to do with the 13 bloodlines, okay, of all the leading elite families and their belief that they are, descendants of Nephilim, that they are the descendants of, this alien or demon, Satan, breeding with the humans and creating this race. And that basically what he found out by putting all of the information on this blackboard into these AI systems is they came out saying that that this is basically talking about how the 13 bloodlines are having a 14th seat there for Satan to bring in the Antichrist using the AI quantum computing, which is what CERN is all about. And what people like Jim Rickards, he is ex-CIA and massive analyst, high up in all of the elite circles to do with intelligence and also the markets. He wrote Money, GPT, etc. And what he's been saying is that he was recently in New Mexico, which is very interesting because New Mexico, Zorro Ranch and all of it. Um, well, and the governor who supposedly gave that whole massive 1,000-acre ranch to Epstein and all those 7 floors down of the cloning, and Epstein saying he wants to seed the human race with his DNA. Yikes! But basically, what Jim Rickards has been saying is that when he was in New Mexico recently at this kind of conclave of AI people and money people together, he was talking to the director from the CIA, not Ratcliffe or anything, but to do with In-Q-Tel, to do with the funding that goes into DARPA, goes into CIA, goes into these deep projects, and that the head of In-Q-Tel was telling him that what's going on with AI is way beyond what anybody understands. That this is, once they go full quantum, it's uncontrollable, basically. And this gets into, of course, the cyber Satan Antichrist. But that quantum, that breakthrough into quantum, there's no holds barred, there's no way of controlling it, and that they already know that. They already know that that's what's coming, that that's what is going to take control of the AI, and yet they just keep funding it all. And he was horrified by this, but basically that's it. Total just mainstream media reference here. When we look at things like the new Batman movie, okay, I know it's like a jump, but the new Batman movie where they talk about there's a it's what's his name, Lex Luthor, so it's a Luthor Corp or whatever it is, that has captured this technology, a CERN-like technology, where they're able to create stargates, okay, and create what is like a pocket dimension, or they call it a pocket universe, where they create a prison, all right, and so they bring people through the Stargate and stuff them in this side dimension prison, right? And it's horrible there, obviously, just devoid of life and just awful and evil. And basically, these are the kind of things going on here with what they're trying to do with CERN. Yes, and also to bring in the cyber Satan. It's all about conjuring the consciousness, and it's exactly what Joey Pepperoni is talking about with um, this decoding of the blackboard that came out of Little Pedo Island talking about their efforts to um, do the cloning, provide the material for the Antichrist to move into humanity through these interdimensional portals. And I know I'm just kind of jumping out there, but this is literally what we're dealing with. So when in my last video, I was just very, black pilly about, yes, we've got this AI problem. We already know that China's like, they have at least 2 times the amount of power generation than us. They're super far advanced already in AI. And to come out and say that USA is going to be leading AI, um, Trumpian in his way that he says it. Well, it is a fight here for consciousness, and yet, okay, building this beast and these AI data centers with their water system gets radiated and flushes back into our water systems. Just the radiation of the population being a huge concern for how that even plays into the um, the consciousness takeover. Okay, the consciousness takeover, and what that has to do with plasma, what it has to do with our pineal glands. The crazy thing about Pam Bondi blocking the HHS trying to ban fluoride nationally out of the water, um, which destroys your pineal gland, which is the pineal gland is what connects you to God. It is the God gland, and how this AI is the breakthrough when it goes quantum into dealing directly with plasma consciousness from other dimensions, and their ability to have this Stargate system, and many people think they already do. That's already very much a thing. I'm kind of in that crowd, in that group, and yet that's the level on which we're fighting when it comes to this AI. It's not just who's going to provide the best services, the best AI doctor, the best AI therapist, the best AI professor. It's like, no, who's going to be able to manipulate the dimensions that are able to have literal real life Stargate systems through which people can be, captured, manipulated, and not to mention how it affects getting directly into your brain and your thoughts and your dreams and your emotions, etc. So I just wanted to talk about that here briefly because I think it's really important that we understand that this AI fight isn't just about the what's already awful of that they're going to, and it is so awful, create tons of mRNA technology that they just overnight to your home and say, oh, you're devoid of this, and we're watching you through all your devices to see if you take this medicine we sent you so you can be a good doobie and get your social credit score up. That's horrifying enough as it is, but you add these other dimensions, which are this um, basically a cyber Satan dimension, this digital antichrist, whereby they're accessing platforms with demons, beings beyond the dimension that God has set up for us here to be in union with God, and to instead invade this planet. And that's kind of the seriousness of what we're dealing with. And so when you see things like, Blanche is going to meet with Maxwell, right? She's not just an awful pedophile, procurer of children, a handler of Epstein, which she is, massive Mossad, CIA, everything connected. But she also is a high priestess in this cyber Satan um, satanic network of these people. And as they go higher and higher up the chain to do the 13 bloodlines, all of it, she's a central player in there. And they've stuck her in this jail to control her. And what she does next is going to be, I think, a very enormous concern to all of us in which way this is going to go and what the DOJ is going to do. And is it going to just be, we see the roll up of a few hedge fund managers Or will this be the big unraveling, okay, of so many as they flip up, flip up, flip up the lower players into the larger picture? That's what we're praying for. We're praying for the takedown, of course, of the larger picture, and we're praying for that, and that's going to happen. So, another cultural reference, and to also do with this CERN stuff and what Epstein's about, what the capture of the scientists and getting back into MK Ultra and DARPA and In-Q-Tel and all of it. Another cultural reference that's out recently is this. There's this show called Institute, and it's based on a book by Stephen King called Institute, who's deep in there. And this is about basically how the secret institute where they basically kidnap kids who show that they have psychic abilities or telekinetic abilities, and take them into the institute and suck them dry and then kill them, kind of thing. Sorry, it's not very cheery video today, but it's all trying to put out into the culture how much these things are already happening all around us, and we try to just go on business as usual. And I know this video is kind of focusing on those things, because this, I think, is the real, besides all the environmental disaster, the poisoning of the water, the stealing of the energy, literal, like, we complain so much about we're having our energy stolen from us, just from being wage slaves or being enslaved through the system and the brainwashing and the ways we live our lives by just going along with this program. It just keeps us doing the things that we're supposed to do, et cetera, et cetera. The energy suck and the way that the elite satanic capture is all about, based on energy. And of course, it's why the Rothschilds, et cetera, et al. Bought up all of the energy companies across the world. It's because this sucking of energy is what's key. And so as we bring in this monster system that is AI, people are like, I've even seen in my comments, you'll be able to fly cars. It's going to be so great. We have these flying cars. It's so amazing. People, lives, the entire world changed when the actual car on the earth, came, and people were free, and nobody loves more than me. A great, the freedom of the car and the freedom of travel. Absolutely, 100%. Such a beautiful thing. But you have to remember, what did that take away? What did that put out of place? Well, it was the massive destruction of the rail system, right? And millions of people depended on the rail system here in the USA, 100%. And it allowed so much to happen where people could just travel by rail, and it was cheap and it was easy, and it would be nice to have it now, right? Just you go to Europe, you can travel by rail anywhere. Can't do that in the USA. The rail system was destroyed in order to bring in the car system, and while it's very amazing, it also made life way more individualized, way less social, and it also really interrupted a lot of organization that was going on at the time, to basically fight injustice or go up against different things. And so it's very interesting, when people say, oh, we just want flying cars, we want to, it's going to be fantastic, it'll be a whole new thing. Yeah, that if people think that they're just going to be like, hey, go have your flying car and take off, no. Okay, without some social credit score system and some massive surveillance, nobody's going to be flying around freely in their cars. Okay, that's not going to happen. And what's going to happen instead is we'll have massive, huge plantation of this country with huge, massive AI data centers taking and stealing all the energy, while there's going to be massive blackouts and pollution. That is some of the worst pollution that can happen, because it's the EMF pollution, it's all the multiple Gs, up to 10G pollution, the radiation, and all of the unrecyclable, unbiodegradable infrastructure, of what is the AI infrastructure, not to mention this little dodgy issue of there being a massive Hadron Collider through which all of these AI systems are going to be ultimately connecting with, that is trying to connect with Satan, a cyber Satan, and just a plasma Satan, a whole other dimension of reality. And, this is the interesting thing here, the twist that's not really being talked about, even though several years ago we talked about quantum AI, the breakthrough. There was the D wave. Oh, we're so close to the quantum. And once they go quantum chips, then there's no stopping, really, the massive control over humanity, because there'll be no stopping AI. That will be the full Skynet destruction. And so I know I'm just going on about all of this, but it's what I felt like doing today on a Friday. I feel like this AI threat is massive, because it's not controllable. And while I super appreciate President Trump's ability to, business-wise, get all this done, I don't appreciate that America is being subjected to it, even though I understand that China is already moving so fast in this direction. And yet it's the World Economic Forum. It's all of the big banksters that want this. And why is because they're all in the cult of the big money, the cult of the cyber Satan, and believe in this crap, okay, and this domination plan. So this is kind of just a ranty video today. I'm sorry it's not more informational in the sense of deep information. Yeah, there is a ton of links you'll be able to go to below to check out all this. But, as you know, Tim Burchett, who we love Tim Burchett out of, I think he's Louisiana, or Tennessee, Tim Burchett, representative. He's the one who launched, that Ghislaine Maxwell should be subpoenaed to be deposed and in prison by the House Oversight Committee. And that that the Congress should be able to know the names of the people who abused the girls that she was put into prison for, trafficking and abusing herself, and that Congress should absolutely follow that money trail that is absolutely available through all those bank receipts. That they wanted to depose her in prison on August 11th, but after this situation here with Todd Blanche running down there, and assistant DOJ going down to Tallahassee and preempting Congress, it just means that they're going to control it, okay, through the DOJ. And I'm not a giant fan of it, not at all. And so I think I'm going to strangely leave it there. I've had like kind of a strange week, and there's a lot going on. But this is what's been on my mind, how much this rabbit hole is all interconnected, between the Epstein scientists, the AI, the DARPA, the In-Q-Tel, the push to open up our planet to a cyber Satan through the plasma state of consciousness and matter, and that CERN is just building, over there in Switzerland, just massively increasing in size, and that we're just rushing headlong there without guardrails, as Trump is, how is he going to control it? He's not going to be here long. And flying cars, I would easily forgo flying cars, okay, to be able to just freely, have life and freedom, and stop the total takeover of our country by this massive pollution that is the AI infrastructure, and the claiming of all of our lands that already have been stolen from us now being given to corporations to build on. And yeah, so tariff rebate checks, it's a nice gesture. But we have just big concerns, and that's kind of where I wanted to focus today. So don't mean to bum you out here on a Friday evening. I hope this weekend you can get some rest and relaxation and some great time with family and friends and fellowship on Sunday with your, with your community, with your church community, and just celebrate life as much as we can, and pray, pray, pray that there is divine God's intervention here in this rollout, because there is so much good. Okay, Trump is doing so much good, but this AI infrastructure rollout and its connection to the larger picture of the Epstein pedo satanic cult um, should, just put it in perspective, that people understand that we're not just dealing with the tech bros. Okay, it's the people who run the tech bros. Okay, it gets deeper and deeper, up and up into the echelons, the 13 bloodlines of the families, but also just the players who are in control of the people who are the CEOs of these tech companies. So I will leave it there. Squirrely today, I know, but that's okay. I'll be back with you next week, and we will continue on, hopefully, with more concrete news, because I think that's what you do appreciate to hear on this channel. And let's just do lots and lots of prayer, okay, over the weekend. Protect Trump there in Scotland, and let's just pray for humanity. Pray for God's intervention on Cyber Satan. And truly, God's intervention, that these plans are rolled out and will be curtailed in and in their construction to prevent this from happening instead of enabling it. Feels like a big ask, you know. But yeah, God is great, and God is powerful, and God is capable of everything. So that's where we sit. Thanks so much for listening. You are free, and if you want to support the channel, there's ways to do so below. So appreciate it. And I also want to mention c60evo.com if you're concerned about radiation from AI data centers. c60evo.com/YAFTV. 10% code off is YAFTV. Anyone who supports the channel gets 15% off with a different code and link sent to you. And again, this ESS60 that it says here, the organic capsules made in the lab in Houston, that is the best in the world, and the purest in its 100% removal of all solvents and everything that go into it, where it's created in this incredible laboratory that the machinery gets to the heat of the sun, and they create all these fullerenes, and this is the one that is set for humans to be able to, in my words, fight inflammation. It's being bought up by all the big C clinics to help clean out the mitochondria, restore the health of your DNA and cellular health, which is the engine. Okay, cellular health is what makes the engine of your body continue to fire in all the proper ways. And so check it out, c60evo.com/YAFTV, code YAFTV for 10% off. And thanks so much for watching. We're going to keep on. That's our duty. We're put here in this time for a reason, each one of us. And so believe in your purpose and believe in your ability to enact God's plan for you, because each of us plays a vital role at this time. And we'll keep believing in God and what God can do for us right now. So you are free. Happy weekend, TGIF, and I'll see you Monday.